What I'm going to do is talk about some of the myths that surround being a LabVIEW consultant. The target of audience to this is going to be developers who don't know anything about consulting, and hopefully maybe some of the consultants here will also pick up on some tips and tricks. The agenda is, first, I'm going to define what it means to be a LabVIEW consultant, my definition for this talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am and how I got here and why I can talk about being a LabVIEW consultant. And then I'm going to cover 8 myths. I think the program said 10, but then I realized that we live in a binary world, and 8 is a nice round number. So of those 8 myths, 4 of them are going to be what I call pie in the sky, grass is always greener myths, the things you think about when things are getting really down in your job and you think, it would be so much better to just be a consultant. And then I'm going to cover 4 myths that basically I think hold people back from going ahead and being a consultant. And then at the end, if we have time for questions, we can try and debunk other myths that maybe I missed. So let's talk about the definition of the consultant. If you go to the N.I. website and you look up under their partners program, they have things like System Integrators and what's the other one? Solution partners, and then you have consultants. That's an umbrella. That's basically any company that focuses on software. So that includes the very large companies like JKI, and then the smaller companies like myself, the onesie twosies. That's who I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about going out on your own, hanging out your own shingle, and focusing on LabVIEW programming. What I'm not going to talk about is the idea of being a contractor. There's a subtle difference between a consultant and a contractor, and lots of people make a living doing that. And that's basically, you go to a site, you get a contract, you work for 3 months. Usually you're sitting at a desk following other people's instructions, like, we need you to build this driver, that kind of thing. That's not what I'm going to talk about. The consultant is a person that has to go out there, get the job, do the work, and provide it for the customer. So let's talk about a little bit about who I am. Katya Prince Consulting. I've been programming LabVIEW since the early 90s. I started out in graduate school for zoology, and I taught myself LabVIEW, sort of because, I don't know, it was kind of cool. And then I decided I didn't want to do academia, so I panicked, and I took the first job out of school, actually the first interview, first offer, and that was for a test and measurement house, and it just so happened that I fell in love with everything about it. I did a little bit of work in a couple other companies, and then in '98, there was a bit of a fork in the road, and so I decided, let me go try this consulting thing. So in '98, I started Prince Consulting, and I started out as just a sole proprietor, real basic, simple, just no paperwork, basically. I did fill out the paperwork for the business license in Durham, and I had the city inspector come out and look at my place of work, which was a desk in my bedroom, because at that point I had roommates, so I mean, it was that simple. Then I decided in 2001, 2003 area that I wanted to grow. I was going to expand. I was going to, just do grand things. And so I tried to merge my company with another one in the area. That just didn't work. Just these things, they don't happen. I failed. So I went back out again, now as Prince Consulting LLC. LLC is basically just another business type, and I did that to sort of now separate myself from the company. So there's the company, Prince Consulting, and then there's myself. So let's talk about some of these myths. The grass is always greener myths. Myth number 1 I'm going to cover is I can be my own boss. I can set my own hours. Wouldn't that be great? I can do LabVIEW all the time. I don't have to deal with the business end of things. And I can make a ton more cash. So let's cover the first myth, and that is I can be my own boss. And definitely, like, when you're sitting working and you're like, your boss is on you for whatever, or the company is saying you've got to go to this meeting or that meeting, you might think, I can be my own boss. I'll be able to do anything I want to do. And to that, I would say be careful what you wish for. Because when you start a company and you become your own boss, you have to do everything. And now, in order to be successful, you're going to have to be internally motivated. You can't just rely on somebody else to tell you you need to be someplace and do a specific thing. It's all on you, and you're gonna have to be able to one that gets you up in the morning. Time management is gonna be even more crucial. You're gonna have to be dealing not just with doing the LabVIEW programming, but scheduling meetings and that kind of thing. And even though you did it before with your work, it becomes even more crucial. The other thing that can happen is that as you get clients, some of them will behave like bosses. They will start to, some are better than others, but they will have requirements that you need to meet, specific ways they want to have you do things, and maybe timelines and that type of thing. And now, once you get more than one client, now instead of having one boss, you have 3 bosses, all asking for your time. And you gotta remember, bosses aren't always bad. Having a boss can be a good thing. When you're working in a company, a good boss will basically help you, go to bat for you if things aren't going well. They'll shield you from the client maybe, or upper management. And they will encourage you to continue to grow. So if the only reason you think you want to be a consultant is because you have a bad boss or you're having problems with your boss, you might want to consider getting a different job rather than going out on your own. Search for a good boss. Let's go to myth number 2. Myth number 2 is that I can set my own hours. Now, all myths have just a little modicum of truth. And it is true that you will be able to have some control over your hours. You can say, I only want to work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., or I'm going to work from 7 p.m. to 3 in the morning. You could do those types of things to a point. But in reality, if you look over the long haul, this is what it's going to look like, your life's going to look like. You can have a target, I want to work 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, whatever you want to do. But that black line is really what your life's going to be like. You're going to have the highs. You have overlapping projects. You have a bunch of stuff that needs to be done all at the same time. And you're going to have to put in more hours at that point. There are going to be times when you do not have any work. These lows, you're going to have to be able to live through that and deal with the panic of, oh no, I have no work. What am I going to do? And it's just like, it's going to be an internal thing and a confidence thing. You just have to know that it'll turn around. And then the last thing of note in this is that if you want to mitigate those downtimes, you need to be looking for work when you're really busy. If you wait until things are slow, what's going to happen is everything is going to come in at the same time, and you're back to now that peak of having way too much work to do. It does take a lot to sort of plan out. It's never going to be perfect, but now it's up to you because you are the boss, right? Yes?
Do you have time for a...
Sure.
If you have time for an observation, we talked about this last night. You don't have the control over your hours that you think you do, because you do actually have to interact with people who keep regular hours.
Yeah.
The thing you have a lot more control over, though, is your calendar. I mean,
yeah.
I took my kid to Ireland for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Who did I have? Who
Sure.
did I have to go talk to do that? No one. I just
Right.
put it on the calendar and I did it.
Yes. Yeah, what?
She's the one that said I should go.
Right. I guess you do have the ability to, like you said, to control your calendar, but at least early on, this was what my life looked like. Where basically this was reality for me.
Can I also make a point? Those downtimes are great times to work on your processes and other things and build the business side of things.
Yes, this is
Sales and
true.
marketing.
Okay, myth number 3 is that I can be doing LabVIEW all the time. The building could be burning down, but I'm going to be doing LabVIEW. I don't care. I imagine that as you start to work in larger companies, there's a lot of processes, meetings you have to go to, meetings for meetings, and you just want to sit and do LabVIEW. And so that's a myth. The myth behind that is that when you're doing this, when you're going out on your own, consultancy is a business, okay? There's going to be a lot of things, many tasks that you have to do beyond programming. You're going to have to be doing things like writing your own quotes, invoicing and bill payment. You no longer have an accounting department to take care of that kind of stuff. Documentation, you may have to do more of the writing of the initial specs, maybe putting help manuals together, that type of thing. Advertising, you're going to be in control of websites or doing things on LinkedIn. And then planning. The idea that you're gonna have to spend some time and effort working on the business, not in the business. When you're doing LabVIEW programming, you're working in the business, but you're gonna have to plan, just like Sam was saying, work on your processes. How am I gonna be an efficient programmer? The other truth is that consultancy is problem solving, right? It's not just about LabVIEW programming. You're using LabVIEW to solve problems. You should be focusing on your strengths, in the topic, in the area that you have expertise. What if you have automated test experience? Or maybe you know everything about hardware in the loop, medical devices, military clearance. These are all discriminators that will help you get a job. Everybody could say they're a LabVIEW programmer, but if somebody were to come with me with a hardware in the loop problem, I'd have to say, no, I don't have experience in that. An example also for myself was when I first started out, my first job was working for a small startup that wanted to do red blood cell counting. And I think part of the reason why I got that job was actually from the zoology degree that I had. I was able to understand when they talked about red blood cells and microscopes and imaging and all that kind of stuff, so that it wasn't that I was talking to them about LabVIEW, I was talking to them about their problem, how do we count these cells, and I was gonna solve it with LabVIEW. I think one thing to think about too is if you couldn't do LabVIEW at all, what expertise do you have beyond that? And try to use that as your selling point. Let's get to myth number 4. I can make tons more money. And again, grain of truth, maybe. But let's just do a little comparison. Let's say we have an employee that makes $50 an hour, and we have a consultant that makes $100 an hour, okay? Twice the salary, or twice the hourly rate. How many people here think that the consultant will make double what the employee makes? Okay, smart. What about 50% more? Anybody? Yeah, okay, some people, 50%. What about, who thinks that the employee would make more than the consultant? Anybody? Okay. Well, let's do the numbers. So first, let's take a look at the employee. The employee's making $50 an hour, 40 hours a week, 50 years a week, 50 weeks a year, whatever those numbers are, 100K. They also get 2 weeks of vacation, so that's another $4,000. So their gross income is 104. If you take into account income taxes, and these are all rough numbers, guys, okay, so their take-home pay is 88.6. But wait, there's more. Since they're working for a company, their employer may cover their health insurance, so that's essentially another $5,000, $6,000. And maybe they do other things like they have a 401k match, or they have some sort of, gym membership or some other perks like that. So the real value that the employee gets is about $95,500. Now let's take a look at the consultants. Base salary, first thing you see straight off the bat, they aren't going to be able to pay bill out 40 hours a week. So I just sort of made a guesstimate that like 1 day a week over the course of a year, the equivalent for downtime or dealing with quotes and all that kind of stuff. So maybe
Can I say that's being very generous?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's just say I am being generous. So that makes this even, oh man, that changes the numbers. Anyway, so they're starting off with 160. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. And then of course you don't have any vacation pay. So if you want to take those 2 weeks of vacation, you don't get any bonus there. And then of course you have business expenses. When I started out, with a desk in my bedroom, those types of small amounts, and I'm assuming, like for most consultants, they don't have other things like office expenses. $10,000 is a pretty reasonable amount of money to cover your business expenses, which could be your LabVIEW license, any other sorts of insurance. If you have to travel to something like this, it's that kind of thing. You have to cover your, yes, Aaron.
I would say I pay more than that month. I do pay more than that monthly just in
No, that's
health
yearly.
insurance.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes. So health insurance is $5,000. I'm assuming, again, there's assumptions. The assumption here is that this is no longer paid by the employer, it's paid by you. And so the gross income here is gonna be 144. So it's still higher than the employee. But now we have to take into account taxes. This is a little bit higher because the gross is a little bit higher, but here's the real kicker, and that's self-employment tax. So on top of your regular federal taxes. As a self-employed person, you have to pay other taxes. It's a fact of life. These might not be the exact right numbers. Bottom line, you're going to have to pay more. And so in this example here, yes, the consultant is making a little bit more, but not by much. And there is a rule of thumb that basically says that if you want to go as a consultant, that you need to make double gross in order to actually have about the same. And that's what this sort of shows. The other thing I want to point out is the idea of the taxes. They become a much bigger deal when you're working for yourself. And they're definitely something you have to consider. When you are deciding, oh, maybe I'll go out on my own, and you're starting to write up your budget, and you say, I need $1,000 to cover my monthly expenses. Well, you aren't going to bring in $1,000 and cover everything. You need to consider that you need to bring in $1,200 to $1,300 a month to cover the taxes, and then you have your expenses out of that. The other thing is that I recommend for anybody that's a consultant is that any money that comes in, first thing you do, you take that 25 to 30% off of that check and toss it into account. You're going to have to be paying taxes throughout the year and at the end of the year, and if you don't have that money set aside as you go, you're going to be in a pickle come tax time. You have to come up with that cash. Yes?
Will you be talking about the perceived risk of being employed versus being self-employed?
Yes. So those, yes.
Also, because the cash flow is irregular and you're dealing...
Okay, that's my next slide. And so, so my next slide is that you have to be able to deal with irregular pay. You are not going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You're going to get a paycheck after you send an invoice. You'll get a check 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depends on the company. And they're definitely, the bigger ones want to push it out 90 days. If you write your contracts, you might be able to get paid as the project goes along, but most of the time you finish a project, you sent that invoice out. So this is that slide from before, and now on top of it, I have when you get paid. Most consultants have a slush fund, for lack of a better word. You need to have a big buffer. And how much is sort of up to you. I talked to Fabiola about this, and she said you should have a year's worth of pay to basically use as a buffer so that you aren't panicking when things are low and you're not getting paid. At most 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But you do need to have that. Yes, Aaron.
You also have to worry about whether your customer may end up declaring bankruptcy and you don't get paid.
Hopefully that doesn't happen, but yes. Yes, Sam.
I will also say it's good to have multiple income streams. You really do not want to depend on one contract because they can disappear pretty quickly.
True. I will sort of get into that. Yes, okay. So now we've covered, yes, Casey.
Do you have a slide, or do you talk at all about saving for retirement? Because that's another thing you have to do a lot more intentionally as a consultant.
That's a very good point. I did not cover that. That I could have put in with like the other expenses that you need to consider. That will also change your taxes and all sorts of stuff. But yes, that's a very good point. You're no longer having your employer take care of your 401k type of stuff. But that's sort of something that you have to do yourself these days anyway. Like if you are working for an employer and you want a 401k, you still need to set it up. Yes, Ravi?
But when you're working for yourself, you as the company have more control over how much you can pay yourself in 401k and that kind of stuff. So you can kind of max out what your company can pay towards your retirement and what you can pay. So that brings your taxes significantly lower.
That is very true. That's an advanced topic, and we could talk more about that kind of stuff later. But yes, you do have more control over that type of information. Okay, let's move on to the 4 myths that can hold you back. So I've now just dashed all your hopes, squashed them in the ground. You know, you're like, oh man, okay, I really can't be a consultant. And so what I'm going to cover now is the idea of these myths that are going to hold you back from wanting to go out and be a consultant. First one that people will think about is, well, I can't go out because I'm not a LabVIEW expert. I've got to be an extrovert. I've got to be a salesperson. It's a super risky venture, and that I need to do everything by myself. So let's talk first about the myth of I must be a LabVIEW expert programmer. And to that, I'd say no. This is a slide here of all of the things that I have either learned or either didn't exist or that I had to learn. And this is just a small list. There's a bunch of other things that I had to learn. And actually, when I first started out, LabVIEW projects did not exist. Event structures did not exist. Classes did not exist. But yet I was still doing this. And it was only once those came into play, you have to learn it, yes, but there's no way to become an expert if it doesn't exist. The other thing, too, is going to happen even in 2005. I've had to learn new things. Cybersecurity has become a bigger deal. I have a couple of FDA projects, and we're dealing with signed executables and SBOMs. I just last week had my first project with a channel wire. Somebody else wrote the program with a channel wire. I'd never used them. I knew they existed. So I had to figure out how they worked and how they were being abused and fix things, and then getting into .NET callbacks. Now, some of this stuff you guys say, well, of course you should know all this, but I didn't. It's way too many things for everybody to know everything. The other truth is that you're going to basically learn as you go. There's no way to know everything you don't know, especially if it doesn't exist yet. But what I will say is that if you want to be a consultant, the best thing to do is to have at least some experience taking a project from start to finish. If you come out of school and all you've done is write drivers as part of a team, no, you don't have enough experience. You really need to have the experience of doing everything from start to finish, or at least being the lead on that and understanding all the processes it's going to take to do that. The other thing I hope that you would have before you go out on your own is to have worked on a project that failed or had some very hard nuggets that you had to get through. It's going to happen as a consultant that you're going to run into situations where things just don't go your way, and learning how to solve those when you're being paid first is experience that you cannot be bought. I would also say hone your troubleshooting skills, the ability to pick up somebody else's code and quickly understand that, be able to understand from the customer, I have a problem X, and be able to sort of say, okay, well, would that be hardware or software? And then be able to troubleshoot along the lines in an efficient manner. That being said, so you don't have to be an expert per se when you get started, or even at this point, I don't think I'm an expert. I don't know everything. If you want to be part of the NI Partner Program, you will have to have some certification, and that's either a CLD or a CLA. And it could be any of the other types of higher level certifications like test stand or something along those lines. Myth number 6 is that I must be an extrovert or a salesperson. Most of my friends would not think I'm an extrovert. I'm up here in front of this group, petrified, but yet I somehow do it. And luckily, actually working as a consultant is a little bit easier because confidence is going to rule the day. Hopefully I'm confident. Personality doesn't matter. Any personality can do this job, okay? You do need to have the ability to talk one-on-one or maybe in a small group. You need to be able to present a quote. You need to be able to answer questions with confidence and honesty. If you don't know something, don't try and give them the gobbledygook. Say, I don't know it, let me go look it up, or that's not my expertise, and hand it to somebody else. Your customer or your potential customer will appreciate that and will come back later if they find something that works for you. In terms of sales, when I first got started, my only experience in sales was selling door-to-door Girl Scout cookies and candles or popcorn or whatever for a band. And I hated that with like an absolute passion. I hated the idea that I was intruding on these people's lives and trying to foist and guilt them into buying this box of cookies. Just hated it. And that was my sort of understanding of sales. And the truth is that when you have a customer calling you, they're calling you because they have a specific problem they think that maybe you can solve. So you aren't trying to sell them something they don't want or they need. You're trying to solve their problem. And so it becomes less of this adversarial of, I'm trying to get some money out of you to buy this widget that you don't really need. And the other thing to remember too, you don't really realize it, but you are actually always selling, right? When you're working as an employee and you want a particular project or you want to go in a particular direction, you are selling your work. You are convincing your manager that I am the person for this job. I have the expertise. I want the experience. You're already doing it. It just so happens that, it's just in a slightly different environment. The next myth is that going out on your own is super risky. And it's going to cover some of the stuff we've already talked about. The idea of the unpredictable income, that's what people on the outside are going to say. No medical benefits. There's an abundance of distractions, that being that it's going to be hard to focus on this. And that I think overarching this idea of risk is that you have this idea of potential failure. What's going to happen? I'm just going to trip and fall, and everything's going to blow up in my face. And what I would say, and we've already sort of talked about these, and yes, it is a risk that you'll have unpredictable income, but if you know that that's coming and you plan for it, it's not really a risk, is it? And what I would say too is that people are blind to the risks around them, right? There are risks of being an employee. What if you had bounced paychecks? Or in your case, you're talking about somebody going bankrupt. What if your employer goes bankrupt? What if they lay you off for some reason, right? These are all risks of being an employee. You get trapped in a hostile work environment, you don't like it, or you have to deal with office politics. These are all risks of being an employee, or you end up in some sort of a dead-end job where you're getting uninteresting projects. Those are all risks of being an employee, but you don't ever go into a job thinking, I can't take this job because maybe I'll get laid off, right? You have an emergency fund, you go into the job, and you say, if I get laid off, I have this emergency fund that will keep me going until I find the next job. So really, when you decide you're going to go out on your own, you really need to consider what is the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I would say the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you don't get enough work, and you basically, you give yourself a timeline, a year and a half, you don't get enough work, things don't seem to be going your way, so you stop and you go get another job. It's the same thing as if you're an employee, you go into a job, you work, oh yes, Alan.
I was talking to an outsourcing specialist once when I was transitioning out of N.I, and this person pointed out that if you are in business, and he was actually talking about franchises, but if you're going to business for yourself, your risk is front-loaded. You're going to go that year, and maybe you'll succeed in getting enough work to sustain you for a little while until you can get things rolling. Maybe you don't. As opposed to going to work for an employer where your risk is back-end loaded, because when they hire you, you're the golden person. They think you're awesome, and you're going to have a couple of years of grace. And then things are going to shift, or they're going to run out of work, or you're going to have falling out with people. And so the longer you're at a job, the more likely you are, statistically over everybody's businesses, of getting fired. Whereas if the longer you run a business, 27 years, I don't think you're worried at this point.
No. So the main takeaway to this, and this is in sort of anything you do in your life, and this sort of calls back to some of the stuff that was talked about yesterday about risk, that adage of expect the best and prepare for the worst. And that will reduce your risk, and even your perceived risk. So the last myth that I will talk about is the myth that I need to do everything myself. And this is sort of the flip side of I can be my own boss. So some people will say, I could be my own boss, I'd be awesome. And then other people are like, oh my God, I couldn't be my own boss because there'd be all these things I need to do, And to that, I basically say there are tons of resources out there to sort of help you get started and help you keep going, okay? In the beginning, and actually as you're planning to do something like this, hire either as a consultant, so to speak, or a part-time, aspects that you don't know about. Accountants, lawyers, financial planners, any assistance that you might need. I highly recommend, going to something like a financial planner as you're planning to do this, so that they can give you sort of an unbiased, uninterested evaluation of where you really are. If you are living paycheck to paycheck right now, there is no way you should be a consultant. That irregular pay will just kill you. So it's worth, you can go and you can buy an hour of an accountant's time, And the other advantage to doing that, you can get a lot of this information out on the web, but the advantage to like hiring somebody local is that they will know the rules of the, they have the expertise. They know what laws and taxes have changed, and they might be able to help you decide what type of business you want to do. Is going as a sole proprietor or an LLC, or what do you plan to do with your business? Maybe an S-corp, something a little bit better. So get enough resources from these other people that have other expertise you don't. There's a lot of local businesses organizations that have a lot of resources for small businesses, like a Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Administration. Sometimes community colleges will have different classes about starting a business. You know all the LabVIEW stuff. You need to know more about the business stuff, and this is stuff that can sort of help you understand that. There's other consultants, so I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Will all the consultants that are here raise your hand? You just have to raise your hand. So look around at all these guys. We've all been doing this for a number of years. Maybe lots of years like me, maybe 2 or 3 years. So we've done it all. We've done it wrong. We have opinions on the best way to do things. So use us in terms of bouncing ideas. I highly recommend that you find a mentor. I was lucky that one of the people that I worked with actually happened to be an N.A at the same time. This is way back when. They sort of helped me. They basically, they pushed me when I was uncertain. And they also reined me in when I started getting outrageous and stuff. Somebody, again, that can give you an honest opinion on where you're going and be in your corner when you have doubts. And then the last thing here would be to network. Yes, Jeff.
Going back to the second to last bullet point, there is a Discord group, and we meet every other week via video conferencing called the Business of LabVIEW. It's a network of international LabVIEW consultants, and the discussions always focus on the business aspect of it.
See, networking, it helps. I learn these new things. That's what I do. Yes, way in the back. Sorry.
Push. Hey, there we go. I'm glad you touched on finding a mentor. That was invaluable when I was running my business. Take them out to lunch, do things, unexpected, invaluable help.
Yep.
Other things are the balancing a workload, impossible. I was never able to do it.
That's true.
Lack of 401k is something you have to consider. It's nice to have the corporate matching and other things.
Yeah, but you can save a lot of money with a solo 401k.
You can, but you don't get the matching. And
that's true. That's true.
And then the most important, paid time off, holidays and stuff. There is no paid holidays when you're a consultant.
That's very true. Yes.
One of the most valuable things that I did, I was just about 30 years ago. I knew my job was sort of ending. I thought maybe I want to be a consultant. I took a course on being a consultant, just a local course, and it told me very much at that time I didn't want to be a consultant.
Right, exactly. So that's sort of this talk as well. This is to give you the unvarnished truth of like what it really means, because like I said, you get these ideas, these pie in the sky. Being a consultant on your own is just all great stuff, but there's a lot of work behind it. Network. So the second to last thing is, so who can be a LabVIEW consultant? And basically, I'll say anybody who wants to be a consultant can be a consultant. Do you want to be a consultant? That's another question. But I think that some of the traits of somebody to be a good LabVIEW consultant is you absolutely have to be self-motivated and be truthful to yourself, about that kind of stuff. Curious, you're always going to be exploring, learning new things about LabVIEW. You're going to have to be dedicated to be able to take a project from start to end. You can't just like shirk your duty, get halfway through and say, I don't want to, I'll just hand this off to somebody else. You're going to have to be detailed oriented. You're going to have to be the one that dots the I's and crosses the T's. Resilient, you got to be able to deal with those ups and downs. And you've got to be planning oriented, thinking about the business as something separate from yourself. I think as an entrepreneur, that's a very, very hard thing to do, and I do it very poorly. But if you think you might want to do and expand and stuff like that, you need to separate the business from yourself. And then the final thing I'll say, I didn't put it in here, is that you need to get buy-in from the people around you, your family, your partners, whoever, they're going to be part of this process too. Especially things like the irregular pay, you have to have buy-in that they understand that that's going to happen. And they understand that you're going to have weeks where you're working 80 hours a week, and then there'll be weeks when you don't have anything to do. If you don't have buy-in from the people around you, you're going to get conflict either within the company, and that's going to die, or within your relationship. So that's what I recommend. Anyway, so with that, if there's any other questions or any other myths that you want to debunk.
Can I add one thing to your last list? Good at saving helps a lot.
Well, that's true. So that's that whole idea of you need to have that cushion to be able to get through the lean times. So yeah, I forgot to mention that. So what will happen too is that when you get that check, so no money, no money, no money, and all of a sudden you have a check like this, it's like, woohoo, let's go to Vegas. It's like, no, let's put all of this away so that I can live for the next 3 months, So yes, Aaron.
This will be a subset of your resilience, but I would also argue as a consultant, you do have to be good at taking stress, because frequently, not always, hopefully not frequently, but I do find myself fairly commonly getting the projects that are already off the rails. There's a reason they're coming in and trying to get the expert. And so some of these projects were coming in when it's already out of the frying pan, in the fire, deadlines have already been missed. It's how fast can you fix this? And the fixing can be a lot of troubleshooting that you have to be willing to really get your hands dirty and figure out what goes wrong, what has already gone wrong, so that you can fix it.
Right.
I would also go back to, this is a combination of, I think it was myths 3 and 5, but when you're looking at expenses, you're also looking at not only buying the software, but what hardware and what tools should you buy. As when I was with a alliance partner prior to becoming a consultant, there were a lot of times that the company didn't want to buy a $100 or $200 tool that could have saved us $500, $1,000, $2,000 in time.
Right.
And so knowing when to spend money, even though that means it's not going to be in your pocket, it's going to be in the business's assets, but it can make your life a lot better. You also have to bring that into account.
That can go both ways. Like, you do have more control over what you buy, but then sometimes your alliance, whoever you're working for has that hardware, that $100,000 hardware that you are not going to get as a consultant. Then there's ways around that. Sorry, Eli had something first.
Well, I was just curious to understand, a lot of people raise their hand that they're a consultant, and I'm kind of interested to know, hopefully most of you are in the partner program. That'll give you some advantage pricings on things like our software, but I'm just curious to understand if there's those of you who aren't. I don't know if there's an easy way. Maybe show of hands if you're a consultant and you're not an NI Alliance partner or in the partner program. Handful? Okay. We can talk offline about what it might take to get you in the partner program.
Yeah, and I have no idea about what's required now, because I became a partner 20 some odd years ago, and everything has changed about that. I will say, if you're starting as a consultant, you're not in the partners program, and you don't, not to say you don't want to buy the software, you can sort of offload that on the customer, sort of say that becomes a requirement. And so you don't need to be an alliance partner straight off, but you probably, in order to get the discount on the software, I recommend it. Yes.
No, behind me. Wait, oh, I think I got it. Can you elaborate a little bit? Sales.
Yeah, that network? Yeah, okay. So I knew that question was going to come up. It is so difficult. So I will give a list of all the different ways that I've gotten leads. I've worked for other alliance partners. Other alliance partners have passed me stuff that they can't do anymore. So I've subcontracted, and they've also passed me leads. I've gotten NI leads, although that has dried up. When I first started working, I worked with a lot of people. The company I was working at, one of the first projects I was working on, everybody left. They went to different companies, and now they knew that I was a LabVIEW programmer, so when they ran into something at the other company. So references. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner sitting across from somebody I didn't know. I said, I LabVIEW program. Oh, really? We need a programmer. Went in the next week and I had 2 years worth of work out of those guys. So it's going to be that kind of thing. And yeah, it was a great thing. So yeah, there was some beer that was passed back to him, sort of say, yay. So there's that kind of thing, and it's going to be sort of random things. It's going to be the people that you know, letting everybody that you know about it is going to be key. Getting those first few are going to be really difficult. Oh, also a website and maybe LinkedIn. Those would be the other ones too. So, Sam.
I was just gonna say, don't be shocked. Like one of my big shocks when I started out was like, I worked at a big company. They had Subversion and Bugzilla and all that at the time. When you start on your own, you lose all that IT support. So like you have to do all of that yourself. That's worth thinking about. And also access to fancy equipment. I worked in a lab. I had tons of PXI chassis. I could just grab one and play with it. On my own, I have 0 PXI chassis because they're way too expensive to just buy on your own, just have sitting on your desk. So
that's true. That's very true. Yes.
This is maybe a myth. It's also kind of a risk. Maybe the myth is that you absolutely have to do it yourself. You want to start a consultancy. I recommend this, but there's a big caveat. Maybe consider having partners. You know, a partner or more than one partner. It divides the workload for the non-LabVIEW stuff and the LabVIEW stuff. Yeah. And it's good to get different perspectives. And sometimes it's just different to have. It's advantageous to have someone to bounce ideas off of when you're forming your business, when you're crafting your policies, and shoulders to cry on when you're in those low periods. But it's a huge risk because it's a bigger commitment to getting married if you have a business partner.
Yeah, and so that's why I sort of recommend having a mentor. So maybe a mentor is sort of like a proto partner, you know. And once you get a partner involved, then you have personalities, and now you're having the stress of now I have to get more work, so both of us have work. So it adds complexity. I wanted to start off just blood simple. I'm just going to work for myself. What sort of myths are there? Sam.
I could say I know several people who've had partnerships, and most of them have not worked out very well. So
remember how
it is possible to have issues with that.
Yeah, you remember how I said I wanted to expand my business? That was a partnership type of thing, and that failed. So yeah, it happens, and so you know, there's nothing if you go out, you do this for a while, and it fails, whatever that means, it's not the end of the world. I think people sort of get stressed out. It's just like another job. You can do this for 5 years and you can say, okay, well, I did this for 5 years and now I'm going to go back to working corporate. I know there's quite a few people here that have done that. Go back and forth between working for yourself or working corporate.
And actually the skills you gain as a consultant make you more valuable in the corporate world too.
Yeah, so. It's not like you're not doing anything in that time working as a consultant, right? It's like you're running a business, you're learning everything that needs to go with it. And now you've got that in your pocket as a skill that you can then put on your resume as, yes, I know how to write quotes or deal with the purchasing for the government, you know, that kind of stuff. Yes.
Are there any LabVIEW consultants here, single person, that are LLCs but not S corps?
Oh yeah, I'm an LLC. Not S corp? No. So yeah, we could. That's like a whole other thing is the terms of like what type of business you want to create, and it really has to do with like how much paperwork you want versus how much money you think you're going to make versus where you think your business is going to go. If you think you're just going to be working for yourself, setting up a single person LLC is the simplest. It's not the cheapest, but the simplest. S corps allow you to expand more easily. Yeah, Aaron.
S corps can also have advantages in terms of health insurance as the health insurance regulations change.
That's true.
My wife was also a consultant and started several years before I did as a sole proprietor. But when I went independent, we couldn't get health insurance until we did the S corp.
Right. So that's a whole other aspect, and that's part of the reason why you want to go and talk to people about the advantages and disadvantages. Everybody's situation is different. If you're healthy, you could do an LLC, not worry about it. You get health insurance on the wherever it is, ACA, the marketplace, that type of thing. If you have either yourself or your partner or kids or something like that that has a serious health benefit, or not benefit, health issue, or you have, you know, this becomes a bigger part, you may want to go with an S corp because you do have advantages. And I don't want to go into the details of that because I don't know all that stuff, you know. I just know it exists. It's just like I knew about channel wires. I don't know how they work, you know. So you know, just go to somebody that has that expertise. Yeah, Ravi.
I wanted to bring this out because.
I don't think people can hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, that's
Good.
better.
I throw this out for people to consider. When I'm an LLC, but only registered as S corp for tax purpose, so I have all the benefits, but I haven't seen any negative from it. So I always wondered why people don't go this route as a single person.
So see here, and again, it could be my misknowledge. I didn't think you could be an LLC and an S corp at the same time. You can be one or the other, but I don't know that for sure. Again, contact your local lawyer/accountant. Yes, or do you have a question way in the back? Or here, why don't you go?
I do have a question. So as a consultant, I assume that you've figured out what processes work for you and how you work best. When you go to work with a client and they say, no, we don't like that process, how do you deal with that, even if you know that your way is better?
That's a very good question. I am very malleable, so I don't have strict processes in place. So as long as I can work within their process, I'm okay. But if they go like, wait, went to a customer last week, same customer with the channel wires, where's your source code control? Oh, we don't do that. So, there's definitely going to be times you're like, yeah, you're going to do source code control, So there'll be things that I might recommend to them, but if they say we want to use this version of source code versus that, I'll use whatever they want. So, yes.
How do you manage risk for any kind of control applications?
So when I go into a job, I'm relying on the customer's expertise to tell me what's important to them, and I'm assisting them in implementing that. You have good insurance, and you kind of have to pass it back to them that it's going to be up to them to verify that what you're doing is meets whatever criteria they want. So it's sort of you have to play it back and forth. So most of the jobs I have are very small, or on the whole scale of things. A lot of these bigger projects, but so somebody's pointing their hand. Oh, way over on the side. Yes, sorry.
For your return customers, have you found them to be fairly understanding with increasing rates to account for inflation?
Yes. Yeah, and I actually I'm probably a little bit on the low side, so they're like, yeah, sure, okay. But yeah, they understand that. I haven't gone too crazy. I haven't had any pushback. So, yeah, Casey. Oh.
I was going to go back and answer Taylor's question. I think it's in the name, right? They're hiring you as a consultant, not necessarily as a dictator, right? So you can give them the advice, but it's up to them ultimately to decide whether they want to follow it or not.
That's a good
and you
point.
can also choose whether you want to stay engaged with that customer if they don't.
Yeah. Far side.
Someone had a question about managing the risk. If you write a control application and what happens if it causes a problem. I was worried about that too when I started working on the side as a consultant. But I just had verbiage added to the contract that says it's on the company to make sure that my design is okay, basically. Right. So now I sleep at night.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it too.
I would like to add, it's also okay to pass on a contract. I probably passed on more contracts than most.
Yeah, yes.
I don't do medical, FDA, and it's also okay to fire a customer, which I had to once because they would not implement proper safety.
Yes, okay, to both of those points, yes. And actually, it's good to say no to things that you're out of your depth or that you're not comfortable with. It's better for both parties. And yes, firing, I have had, so in the very beginning, I took a lot of crazy clients. I mean, like not so crazy, wanting to do things that are just off the wall and were difficult to work with. And eventually I got to the point where like, no, I have more work. I just can't work for you anymore. And you just basically have to, projects done, no more new projects and stuff. I think we're almost out of time. Or one more question.
Number one consultant tip, hire a lawyer, have them write a contract for you and enter the negotiation with your contract.
Yes.
And if you don't, remember that their contract is always negotiable. They will ask you for like $20 million of insurance. Don't go out and buy $20 million worth of insurance, negotiate it.
Yes, that is very true, especially with the bigger ones. And that was especially with the net 30 type of thing. Like the really big companies will want net 90. And you can negotiate in your contract and say, no, you got to get me net 30, that kind of thing. So with that, I'll be here all week, short as it will be. So thank you very much.